Okay, I think we're gonna go ahead and get started. Try to hold this far enough away so I don't. Okay, thank you so much for having us here today. So my name is Julie, and this is my colleague Nancy over here. She's gonna try to record notes. We are from a consulting firm called Highland Planning, and so we are part of the consultant team on this project, but our job is to do public engagement. And so mostly it's to go out and get feedback from the public about the project. So there are a lot of general questions that we can answer, but if we get into very specific questions about the project or the street design, those we might not be able to answer, but we will give everyone contact information and ways to get those more specific questions answered. The consulting firm that is doing the street design for this project is a company called Stantec, and they're located right in Rochester. So, where to start? So this project, Interloop North Transformation Project, this is the design phase of the project, and it is a follow-on to a planning study that was done last year. So the planning study looked at a lot of different concepts for what could happen to take the Interloop that's remaining, this northern piece of the Interloop that's shown on this map here, and bring that back down to street level and then reconnect those cross streets. And at the end of that planning study, there was a preferred design concept, which is kind of what is shown on this handout. Now, for people who are not in the room, we're going to leave all of these different handouts and information pieces at the church so that you can pick those up when you're here if you're not able to be here in person today. So going back to that design study and that concept plan, this piece of the project is now taking that concept and bringing on engineers and actually coming up with construction plans and going from a concept to actually how that's going to work in the real world. And so that is again shown. So this concept is shown on the bottom of this handout here. And there is actually going to be a public meeting about this project that's going to be coming up on the 21st. So we'll go into that in a minute. But now that they've had time to work through some of the initial thoughts about how to take this concept and turn it into an actual construction plan, they're going to be presenting something called a scoping report. So it's probably going to be technical, but there will be some general information about the project and you'll be able to ask questions. So let's see. I think on both of these handouts, there is a website, this interloopnorth.com. If you go on that website, there's information right on that first page about those public meetings. So in person is going to be Wednesday, August 24th at 6 p.m. at the Lewis Street YMCA Neighborhood Center. So that one you can just show up to. There's going to be a virtual one on Thursday, the 22nd at noon via Zoom. And so I believe if you go on the website, you can register or you can find the link to that Zoom meeting on the website. So again, if there's any questions we can't answer here, that might be a good alternative to be able to get answers to some of your questions. We can also take questions back and pass those along to Stantec or to the city. So, the main point of us, or the main reason that we were hired to do this outreach, was for two reasons. One was to make sure that everyone in the community, especially people who have houses, businesses, churches are near the Interloop, know that this project is going on. And then the second reason is for us to get feedback from the community about what the priority should be for this part of the project. And so the city of Rochester, so this is on this board way over here to the side. The city of Rochester came up with these general priorities that they think they would be focusing on during this phase of the project. There's things like advancing equity, placemaking, promoting connectivity, ensuring accessibility, providing amenities, creating green space, economic development, diverse housing opportunities. So they've covered a lot. But what they are asking for also in this bottom part is for people to weigh in on anything that they've missed, or even specific parts of these priorities that they already came up with. What do you think is the most important thing to be focused on during this part of the project? And so some of the things that we've heard mentioned a lot are things like affordable housing, safe spaces for kids, like rec centers and places for kids to play, a focus on overall like safety and security. I don't know, what else have we been hearing, Nancy?
I think also the equity, you know, when they built the interloop as a whole, as well as a number of other highways in upstate New York, back in like the 50s, they almost, I think, intentionally just blew through neighborhoods of color and disadvantaged neighborhoods. And part of this is sort of making some restoration and reestablishing neighborhoods and making everything less car-centric and more people-centered. So that's one of the priorities as well.
Thank you. So just a couple other things I want to touch on, trying to look at my boards here to remind me. So this is just showing the past timeline. So Interloop East project. So everyone is probably aware of what happened with the eastern portion of the Interloop. So this is very similar, although I think the eastern portion, it all had to be brought up to grade. Some of the northern part of the Interloop is actually above the street level, so it'll be brought down to street level. So if it's also a follow-on of that project. And the estimated timeframe for construction on this is for them to start construction in, I think, 27 or 28, and then it will take 2 years to finish. So we're looking at this not being done until, yes, 2029 or 2030, which sounds really far away. So this is still the very beginning stages of this project. I think that's all the main points, I believe. So I can open it up to questions that we will try our best to answer. Also, if anybody wants to talk about priorities, we'll put all of your comments on Post-it notes and put them on the board. So that way, if people at home want to participate in that part, they can. And then Nancy's also going to be taking notes on questions and comments so we can make sure that we pass those along to Stantec relating to the project. Okay. Oop, I guess whoever has the microphone.
I'll be first.
Sorry.
Honestly, I don't know how it could be done, but are there any thoughts about making the falls any more visible to the public? Right now, they're rendered invisible and totally inaccessible from this level. Any thoughts about that the team is looking at?
So not that I'm aware of right now, but that doesn't. Yes, so he was asking if there's any plans to make High Falls more visible within this project. And I do not know, honestly, if that has been brought up to the consultant to Stantec or not when they're looking at plans for this or to the city, but that is definitely something that we will pass along and make sure that they're aware that that's a question. We can try to,
They are also working on the state park there.
right, at the same time. So there's two different projects going on at the same
Not
time.
related. The two
Well, they're-
projects.
They're
They're related.
They're related by location, but they're
Right.
not related by funding or by the,
Sure.
yeah, no, they're not.
Coordination.
Yeah. If you walk over to the river, of course, from here, it's very close. And of course, they're doing an enormous amount of construction down below in the gorge. And that is, I'm not sure all of that, what happens there, but of course, they're redoing the Platt Street Bridge. So the visibility, the Pratt Street Bridge is not necessarily in this area, right? But
Right.
it'll be redone so you can walk across the bridge and get good views of the falls, but you have to be walking.
Before you ask your question,
Okay.
I do just want to say, I actually was just in a meeting with the city about this project last week, and the city planning department is very aware of the multiple projects that are going on at the same time.
Sure.
And so I know that they are trying to coordinate. They're trying to be the point of coordination amongst all these different projects. So we will make sure that they get your comment, and if we find out that there is anything going on related to that, we'll try to pass
Yeah.
that back to you through the church.
Well, my
Right.
question related to, of course, we're right next to the inner loop
Right.
where the inner loop, goes over. I mean, flies over, and I'm assuming that's all going to be torn down. And I guess my concern is, will what's being torn down from the inner loop be at the same level for example, of the streets around where we, are bound by, by the sidewalk. Will that all be the level? I mean, there's not clarity in this small map.
Right,
I think the
right,
idea is that it would be the level of this street.
yes,
So
Right,
if
it'll
it
fit
comes
you.
here where the highway is now,
Yes.
it'll be a road, like a regular road, not a highway, at this level, so that people can walk across it.
Okay,
What about the railroad tracks?
That's what I'm saying.
What about the railroad tracks? The railroad tracks are far bigger and more of a visual obstruction than the road is.
On the other side, right?
yeah. The railroad tracks are down farther, right?
Just north.
Of the church, right? They're like up in this area. So again, this may be a better question for the public meeting, and also we can try to get some information on this and pass it back along to you. I do believe that, I mean, so 490 is gonna remain, and so 490 is gonna stay. So there's still gonna be a highway right here, which means there's still gonna have to be on and off ramps. So the area that you're in is a little bit of a gray area, I think, as far as exactly what that's gonna look like. So, because it can't just, there's not just gonna be 490 and then a street level road next to it. So there has to be some way to travel between the two. I know there has been some discussion about extending this piece, a little further down to try to ease some of the traffic, like the transition between the highway and the street level. So I think that that's something that you should keep an eye on as the different versions of the plans start coming out. So we go from concept to, I don't know, in engineering, there's like every percent plans, there's like 10% and 30% and 50%. So I would keep an eye on those and see what that's gonna look like as they start putting that together. If you have any specific concerns or requests about what you would like it to look like, let us know that and we can make sure we pass that along. I'm sorry that I don't have a better answer than that, but I'm not the engineer on the project, unfortunately, so I apologize.
I've just driven through Syracuse yesterday, and I think they're faced with doing the same thing, it appears to me. One of the things that I struggle with is whenever there's a parade or a race or anything like that, it's often on Sunday morning. And so all of these churches down here, people can't get to them.
Okay,
It's very difficult. And I don't think there's been a lot of thought of how to get people into the houses of worship. Because it's always been really traumatic for me anyway. I'm not very good with directions. So
okay, thank you.
So I've been looking at the Interloop since years ago, and I say that because my children were students at World of Inquiry School
Mhm.
number 58. And when the Interloop, the filling in of the other section of the Interloop came up, somebody said, well, can't you take it a little bit further and give that land to the school? Because for example, that's a school that does not have comparable outdoor spaces, to other schools. So I'm just wondering if any thought has been given to that section, over there by University Avenue, of like just giving that land to this city school district.
So I remember this from the planning phase about that discussion, and I don't know about, the actual ownership of the land, but the plan does call for all behind that school to be green space.
Mhm.
So
Yes.
that there would at least be more access, I think, for fields and kids and
Yeah.
running around, because you're right, there's nothing there now.
Yeah, I'm talking about a track.
I know, a track and so forth. Right now, it's just shown as, green space. So I'm not sure what that means at this point, but that's a really good point, and I'll put that on here.
That kind of falls in, that falls right into that category of advancing equity. Because when you kind of look at the resources that kids within the city of Rochester have, you know, versus going out to out into the burbs, it's like a radical difference. So, you know, making that space available for sports for children in the city of Rochester, you know, would indeed be something that would be advancing equity.
Yes, definitely. So, I will give you a little piece of information that I don't know if is public yet, but I guess I'm on camera. So, no, so the way that this is being handled kind of behind the scenes by the city because of funding sources and grants is that this part of the project, this interloop project is more about street design, but there is actually a second project that's about to kick off, which, you know, for the public, it will seem like it's the same project, and that's fine. But that project is going to be focused on mobility and development. So it is more about land use and what's going to be happening with the parcels that are created. And there is supposed to be a little introduction to that project at the public meeting. And the intent through that project is to start showing a much bigger map and showing the parcels and the ideas about what could happen with those parcels. And so again, I think that, you know, once that public meeting happens and that part of the project kicks off, then that will give you some more insight into what the thoughts are about what's going to happen with the land that's created. But that is one thing that we've consistently heard through the planning phase into this phase is making sure that some of that land that's created is used for the school. Okay. Yes.
I hear about, you know, the neighborhood concept of making it more of a neighborhood by tearing down some barriers and stuff. And I know it takes time to do this, but that makes me have wishful thinking that maybe our building could become, part of our buildings could become a community center. And we should start working on it now.
Okay. Thank you.
Can you explain that map a little bit more? Like, is that green where Doopsie's located?
Oh, so this map you're talking about?
Yes.
So this map was just a very basic map that was supposed to be showing the remaining piece of the inner loop that was going to be redeveloped as part of this project. We actually just stuck this little piece of a Post-it note on here to show where we are right now. So this is
Okay.
actually where the church is. So
Okay.
that was just our little addition to kind of show our current location, because it is kind of hard to get your bearings with this map.
And then my second question is, like, what stage of development is this in? Is there actually federal, state, local funding sources that are already committed, or is this in the very preliminary concept stage?
My understanding is that there is already money committed to this.
Okay.
So there was planning money committed to the planning part, and now there is funding committed to the street design phase. I'm not, so I guess unfortunately, I'm not 100% sure. And again, we can find out and we can get back to you. So, you know, there's going from planning to construction plans and like the very detailed plans that they need where we are right now. And then there's the actual like construction. And so I'm not 100% sure if the construction is 100% funded. So we can check on that and we can let you know. But the current phase that we're in right now, that is funded. Okay. I mean, I would say that, I mean, Rochester got national attention for the eastern piece, filling in the eastern piece of the inner loop. And so it was, I'm going to assume that this piece is already funded, but we will check on that to make sure.
They have, if you go to the website.
Thank you,
for
Nancy.
this, there is, there are some articles under the news, including one about, the governor's commitment of 100 million to remove this section. So I suspect it might be more, but.
Possibly, yeah.
there's Quite a bit of money committed. Thank you.
And also part of the development study up for closer, I can't tell. So part of this development study that's going to be kicking off too, you know, part of that is to kind of put a framework together of the types of development that the city is looking for in different areas. And then to get some, you know, in some instances, so some of it's not going to be big developers, but pieces that might be done by big developers to get them to come in and commit funding, you know, as well, so that it's not only funded through, state or federal grants or by the city, that there's outside private money that's coming into the project as well. Okay. Any other questions? Sure.
So one thing the pastor had asked about, reclaiming some recreational space for the schools, and you mentioned that as part of the project priority is having recreational space. So I guess my question is, will the plan focus on new private concerns coming in and funding them, or will it fund things like a school district to develop their green space or a church to develop a gym or a bowling alley? Like, will there be some opportunity to rebuild, improve with existing partners, or will the focus be on private development? That makes sense.
It does make sense. And I don't know that that has been decided yet. So even though the land use issues come up a lot as part of this project, this is really more focused on the street design and the construction. And so that piece is going to also be addressed more in the mobility and development piece. But that is something that we have heard multiple times and that we've been passing back along to the city, is that there is an interest, especially from churches, from what we've heard, to get involved and to have an opportunity to be involved in like this redevelopment and not just have it be outside developers coming in. So yes, we'll definitely pass that along. Okay, yeah, were there any questions online at all? Did we see anything? No? Okay.
This is kind of a follow-up to what Elaine just asked, which is in terms of like, looking at housing, because one of the things that kind of came up earlier is right now the inner loop separates houses that on one side are like $400,000 and $500,000, and you just cross what's there, and you're looking at housing that is less than $100,000. So you're looking at a different population. I mean, it's like, the operative word is gentrification. It's like what's being done to prevent people from, in the existing housing from being displaced.
So that's a very good question. I would say that, so I personally cannot answer that question. I'm not sure. However, the city has hired a consulting firm for that development piece, and they've worked on projects like this in other areas. And so part of their job is to come up with ways to ease that transition. And so by looking at the parcels that are going to be formed and the land that's going to be left over, making recommendations on how that should be done and what types of development should go into those areas in order to make that work and to not have that, to not allow gentrification to just take over throughout this whole area. I have seen some examples of projects that they've worked on in other areas where they've come up with a proposal of what the development should look like, for different cities. And no one really has control over making anyone stick to that plan. It's what the developers want to come in and what they want to propose to do. And in many cases, the build out ended up looking almost identical to the proposal. So there is a lot of experience there in doing this in other areas and trying to lay out a development scenario that is going to be able to come to fruition, but is also going to have the best benefit for the community and kind of ease that transition and make it work, like for the people who are in Rochester. I do know that one of the comments that we've heard is that the whole eastern piece where they brought the road down to street level or up to street level, but then there was like a 5-story building of apartments. Like maybe that's not exactly what people are looking for in this piece, and they're looking for more like human scale and single family homes and townhouses and things. And so the city is aware of that, and they're also going to be trying to incorporate that into the design as well.
Yeah.
Does that answer your question? I know, kind of.
Yeah.
Okay.
I think I'm gonna follow up on that a little bit. You put this green spot where we are. And of course, this map does not show the railroad. But the
Yeah.
railroad essentially goes here. Right here. And of course, there is a barrier there. I mean, you can go under the railroad, but what's over here, a lot is parking lot. I don't know whether they're gonna take this parking lot away. Of course, it was mostly Kodak. Kodak building is still there and it's being different. But I mean, we know this area
Mhm.
and there is some community here, but over here, if there's increased accessibility from this project over here, I wonder what's going to happen over here and whether or not there'll be community there or whether it'll remain in parking lot.
Yeah, that's a very good question. And I apologize that we don't have more information about what's gonna happen with the railroad. I really am not sure right now,
It
so
won't
that's,
change. I
well, right.
understand that.
it has to be in the general, right, in the same area. So, I mean, I think that's part of what will be shown on some of these future plans. Yeah.
You can invite the people online. Unmute themselves and ask the question, and you can hear them.
Okay, so we just want to make sure people online know that you can unmute yourselves and ask questions, and we'll be able to hear you if you want to ask a question. Do you want them to raise their hand or just
Just ask.
go ahead and ask? Does anyone online have any questions? Okay, I'm not hearing anyone right now, so we'll go back to the room. Yes.
I'm pretty sure the railroad tracks are owned by CSX.
CSX, yep.
At least
So, yeah, so the question was about the railroad being owned by CSX. Yes, the city is definitely in conversations with them. So the city wouldn't be able to do anything without talking to them. So they had to be, I'm sure they had to be contacted right at the beginning of the project. I'm gonna go out on a limb and say that I'm assuming that they were also being talked to during the planning phase because you can't really come up with a plan if they're not on board with it. So I'm sure that those conversations have already been happening.
this thing done to the tracks.
Mm-hmm. Yes,
So I'm just kind of wondering if that's, is that?
yes. Yes, those conversations are happening. I would guarantee. Yep.
Are there any types of topics or items that we haven't asked that you thought we might ask or that might be helpful that you've heard elsewhere that would be helpful for us to hear?
I don't think so. I mean, I think that, we want to hear whatever it is that people want to talk about. It would be helpful, even if it's after we kind of wrap up this portion, if anyone does have any other priorities that they would want to put on this board, please go ahead and do that or let us know and we'll put those up there and just make sure that you have these information sheets that have all of the different places you can go to get information on them. And also, like we said, we will leave these in the church office too, so that if there's anybody who couldn't come to the meeting or is at home, you can come and pick these up. But if you just go online and look for Interloop North project, like it'll bring you right to the website and all of the information is there and the links and the meetings and all of that too. So just make sure that, oh, I think the other thing was, if you want to get project updates, you can leave an email address and, I guess we can, if there's anyone else that's not here that wants to be signed up for that, I think you can actually sign up on the website. You can check that, but I think you can go on the website and you can sign up for email updates as well. So I just want to make sure that people who weren't able to come to the meeting can get the same. Yep. So you can go on the website and put in your email address and you can get updates that way as well.
Hi, Julie. I'm
Hi.
Sally. I just want to reiterate that the thought that you had about the other side of the Interloop and when it was filled in and the buildings that were built that do create quite a barrier. And I really do hope that that's not the case here, especially since there's gonna be a state park there, and so that it's not like, oh, well, the state park is behind all of these multicolored buildings, but you can't really see it.
Okay.
So just kind of to reiterate that, because being on Union Street there, it does still feel a little bit like a canyon that was created by the buildings that were built there.
Okay, thank you.
I know I take public transportation and all the, like, the high schoolers and that rely on the interloop and all that.
That the high schoolers are right on the inner loop?
Yeah, because
they're-
when they go from one side of town, they take the interloop.
Right.
Yes, on the
Yes,
RTS buses.
yes, yes.
And the
Well,
RTS buses actually to get back to their garage, some of them actually rely on the interloop too.
that is true. So, so interestingly, before I worked at Highland Planning, I worked at RTS up until the end of this past year. And so you know, RTS is very aware of this project, has been from the very beginning, and is aware that there are going to have to be some, rerouting, you know, of different school routes and the regular routes, depending on the situation. And, they've had a lot of notice, and so it's just one of those things that is gonna have to happen. So, you know what I mean? So it will be taken care of, and any changes that have to happen because of that will be publicized ahead of time. So again, the construction isn't gonna be done until, well, 2029 or 2030, so there's still some time before those changes would have to go into effect. Yes.
Yeah, is it working? Yeah, so on this idea, I think you're gonna be lining a lot of engineers' pockets. And I don't think there's anybody that's altogether too offended about the inner loop. It's just filthy. It's not maintained. And I think it's just something for the state to just say, well, we're not gonna fix it because you've got 5 years. The thing's crumbling and falling apart. It's not even safe to take your car through there. You know, so either fix it or take it down, but for 5 years, what is it gonna just crumble and take apart? So fix it. You know, put the heat on the, you know, who's ever in Albany, if they're there, and say, you know, improve the thing, because you've got rocks falling into the road. People are, you know, running over each other, potholes and the rest of it. I think it's just a way for Albany to say, why should we fix it? And I don't think any groups or families are all that offended about it right now. I think it'd be much better to be safer and be able to move around quicker.
Okay, I
With the
understand.
amount of crime in this city, you know, I want to get home a little bit faster. I don't want to sit at a light and sit there and wait and perhaps get shot.
Well, thank you for your comment, and we'll make sure to pass that along to the city, that you think that some improvements need to be made on the inner loop in the meantime. Okay, thank you. Okay, any other questions or comments?
Could you just reiterate your names again, please?
Sure. My name is Julie Boasi, and from Highland Planning, and Nancy Reka, let me sure I didn't say it wrong, also from Highland Planning. And so we are working with the consulting team that is being led by Stantec on this project. Okay.
So the roadway that is going to replace the inner loop is going to be Central Avenue. Is that correct? Is that the name currently?
I don't know. I can't see that map. Yeah.
So it is, Central and also Cumberland is gonna go
Okay.
through there.
So is it going to be like 4 lanes? Is it going to be a pretty substantial road
Sure.
that replaces the inner loop at this point?
So I think this is also part of what they want to hear comments on, is about this actual design of the street, because that is what they're doing now. And as you may have seen on some of the other streets, the trend now in streets seems to be like going from 4 lanes to like maybe 2 lanes with a turning lane, or lanes with a bike, 2 lanes with a bike lane, or parking on one side, bike lane on the other side. There's a number of different variations that they look at now. What I'm seeing when I look at, for example, which street is this? Oh, also Lyndhurst will go through. Is like, is 2 lanes with a bike path is what I'm seeing on most of these, but it's hard to tell from these and preferred concepts. These are just concepts. That's where the engineering comes in. So please do call in to the public meeting. Yeah, and also when you go on the website, you can see they have a lot of other documentation that they've been doing about traffic analysis, crash analysis, all that kind of thing. So that, because when they take out a highway like this, they do all kinds of analysis about, well, where do we need a light and how much longer will it take people to get where they need to go and what's the traffic volume and so forth. They don't just be like, it would look nicer if we had a road. They really do a lot of data analysis. So that is available to you on the website.
Yeah, and there has been a lot of analysis done about where the traffic is going to go without the inner loop piece being there, and where's it going to, what other existing streets is traffic going to increase on, and what needs to happen in those areas. So it really isn't just, as Nancy said, they're not just going to take out the inner loop and put in an extra road or two. They are going to make improvements to the surrounding areas too, depending on what the traffic modeling looks like and how the traffic is going to be distributed to the other roads as well.
Yeah, bike lane would be great because of course it's good. There's going to be a state park and it's,
Right.
you know, High Falls and it's a beautiful area as long as we have green space along it.
And the complete streets is a big concept right now, right? And so not just putting in a couple driving lanes, but making sure that there's sidewalks and bike lanes and all of that as well. And so that should also be shown as they start coming up with these plans.
I just had a question about the Eastern Interloop project, where all the housing is, you know, that's in the old area where the Interloop actually was below ground
Mm-hmm.
or grown below level. Do you have maps of all those areas? Does your project or someone have maps of all that housing area in that? I've been around that area, but you know, they look a little different, but I don't know what is what. What buildings or what kind of housing it is, or
A map of the existing, what's existing in the
was
area?
created there in the old East project. The housing,
Yeah,
talking about the housing.
That's a good question.
It's available on a website, on the City of Rochester website. You can see all the planning documents and final like drawings and everything on there.
So
Does
yes,
it say what kind of housing is there?
Oh, that's a good question.
so most likely the final plans are probably what was proposed. It doesn't necessarily mean that's what was built. So you would probably need to contact the city and try to figure out like that what was actually built. Like, so you'd have to find like the actual building plans that were filed to build the buildings
I'm
probably.
just more
I know,
curious
it's a good
about the kind of
question.
People that are living in that housing.
It's a very good question. I think that, you know,
We're looking for more community here.
right,
Involvement
right.
and us being involved with people in the area, but we don't know who's living where.
Yeah. Yeah, that I'm not sure about because normally what happens with these projects is, you know, it might go all the way from planning all the way up to the plans of what's going to be built, but then the project kind of stops there. And then what actually gets built sometimes isn't documented in that same way. It's more just like the daily business of the city is approving plans and giving permits and that type of thing. Okay. Okay, well, Nancy and I will stick around if there's any other questions. Feel free to grab anything from that back table on your way out. And we got one more question.
I mean, I see the proposed roads here on this one page.
Yeah,
Are there proposed projects?
no,
No.
no. So,
To fulfill some of these things like diverse housing opportunities. There's
Right.
no plans there yet.
no,
or
so that
amenities or.
was that second project that's going to be kicking off that is going to be focused more on the development, and that is going to start out with going out to the community. And so maybe there'll be a proposed idea of what could go there, but that the first step of that project is going to be asking for feedback on what people want to see.
Okay.
So that project is starting off later than this one, but they probably will kind of merge together at some point and end up being built at, you know, it'll all end up happening at the same time. Okay.
Thank you.
Okay.